Good evening, registered nurses, nurse practitioners, student nurses, and members of the public. I hereby call to order the 67th Annual General Meeting of the College of Registered Nurses of Newfoundland and Labrador. My name is TRACY MACDONALD, and I am the college chair. I would like to say thank you sincerely for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening, which what looks like is a beautiful day in our province, Newfoundland and Labrador. We will take a moment to acknowledge our ancestors. We respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, whose culture has now been erased forever. We also acknowledge the island of Ukta-Umguk, Newfoundland, as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq, and we acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of Nitassinan, the Inuit of Nunavut, and the Inuit of Nunatuckavut. We recognize all First Peoples who were here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As First Peoples have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all. On behalf of the College Council, I am pleased to be chairing the 3rd full technology-based provincial annual general meeting. It seemed like but a dream several years ago when we talked about hosting a virtual meeting. I will run through how tonight's meeting will proceed before we start the formal agenda. First, I will pass it over to our operator, John Duff, Systems Officer for Signal Hill Campus Memorial, who will advise of the process to follow if you encounter technical difficulties. John, I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Tracy. I take my headphones off so I'm not hearing myself. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Like I said in the chat there, you should be seeing and hearing us now. Feel free to reach out in the chat, though, if you're certainly having any issues. Or you can contact us at our AGM email address at agm@crnnl.ca. I'll also note that we're also live streaming on YouTube. If you have any issues at any point, you can go watch us there and then follow along with the audio and video. But I'll note that that is a view-only stream, that you will want to stay connected to this WebEx session to participate in our active discussion and our voting. For those of us that are joining us by the phone on the Accutel connection, please note that while you are muted during our general proceedings, you will be given opportunities throughout for questions or comments. At the time, please use *4 on your handset to unmute yourself when you're prompted by our moderators for kind of an open floor. And if you are having any issues with your Accutel connection, please use *0 to reach an operator with Accutel. I'll also note that I've shared the link there in the chat for the AGM website, which does have all the conference materials and proceedings on it available tonight. And I will be back with you a little later when we get to our voting. Back to you, Tracy. Thanks.
Thanks, John. And thanks, James. I still have my mask on. My IPAC crew will be proud of me. The AGM documents can be found in 2 different places. 1, through the link that was provided through an email, or 2, if you're going directly on the website, you can open the documents by clicking on the AGM banner that scrolls on the top of the homepage. I will now describe those documents in the order of how they will be used on the agenda. Annual meeting business documents include the agenda for 2020 AGM minutes and the AGM meeting rules and privileges. 1, we have the audited financial statements approved by Council June 3rd. Number 2, we have the CRNNL annual report, and PowerPoint presentations will include financial statements, executive director report, and the report by myself as the chair. The PowerPoint presentations will also be shown on the screen for those joining by webinar. I will now describe how the quorum is determined in accordance with Bylaw Article 6, Section 4. The number of members shall constitute a quorum for any annual general meeting shall be A, the voting members present, and B, the presence of 7 members of council, 2 of which must be publicly appointed councillors. Based upon the actual number of participants signed into the WebEx at this point in time, Just going to check with you, John, of the quorum numbers that we have.
Sorry, subtracting my 3, we have 44 online, I should say, all total.
And does that include the full council as well, John?
It does.
Thank you. There are currently 13 voting members on council, and 1 public councillor position is vacant for a total of 14. I confirm that there are 13 councillors online. And as I go through the names, John, if you could just make sure those names are there. So myself, TRACY MacDonald, Glenn George, our vice chair, Stephen Clark, Louise Pinsent Parsons, Patricia Rogers, Donna Luther, Stacey Knutson, Crystal Northcott, Krista Sims, Kelly Barron, Valerie Golding, Kim Legg, and Tanya Ryan.
We may be missing one. I'm going to check the audience there. I will say if someone heard their name, I know we were trying to get Stacy in. Don't believe we've been able to get Stacy in yet, so I'm going to keep working, keep an eye on my email for her. Yeah, Stacy is still having an issue getting in. I'm going to work with her to get in. Confirm the list.
So in the absence of the 1 individual, we do have quorum. I want to highlight that the voting required for this meeting is primarily for procedural matters. For example, appointment of auditors and approval of the nominations committee report. Movers and seconders will be duly noted on the screen with the specific motions. The outcome of each vote is calculated automatically. Once voting is closed, the results will also be displayed online. The vote is passed when 50% plus 1 of those who vote are in favor. The scrutineer monitoring the voting technology for the college is John Duff. For those participating by webinar, feel free to use the chat function to pose any questions or comments throughout the meeting and can be also included in our open discussion forum. For those joining by any other means, the process will be outlined at the start of the open discussion forum. If the allotted time does not allow for your question to be answered, I encourage you to contact the college's executive director after the AGM so that we can ensure you receive the information that you are seeking. Welcome and introductions. At the table with me, I'd like to acknowledge to my left, LYNN Power, Executive Director of the College. LYNN will be assisting with various pieces of the business section of our meeting. Also social distanced in the meeting room is Justin Keynes, College Legal Counsel, Lana Littlejohn, Director of Corporate Services, who we'll hear from later, and James Shepard, Communication Officer, as well as Brenda Carroll, Director of Professional Conduct Review, as well as some other key members of staff who, out with their contributions over the past couple of weeks, tonight's event would not be possible. The agenda. I ask you now to refer to the annual meeting agenda at the start of the business documents. As stated in Bylaw Article 6, Section 1, the college has the authority to approve the annual meeting agenda, and a motion to adopt the meeting agenda was carried at Council's meeting recently held on June 3rd. The minutes of the college's annual meeting held on June 16th, 2020 are found in the annual meeting business documents as well. As stated in Bylaw Article 6, Section 1, the college has the authority to approve the minutes of the annual meeting, and this was done at the October 2020 College Council meeting. I will now call on Elaine Warren, Chair of Committee on Nominations, who will present by telephone the report of the Nominations Committee and the results of the election. John, if you could open up the line for Elaine.
Elaine, you should be there.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, loud and clear. Good evening, everyone. And it looks like Tracy and Lynn, a beautiful forum you have there for your meeting. It looks like a beautiful evening. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Nominations Committee to present the report for the year 2020-2021. On behalf of committee members, Krista Lynn Howell, Sarah Menuzzi, Elizabeth Suley, Renee Ludy Warren, Christine Fitzgerald, who's the CRNNL staff resort, and myself, Elaine Warren, committee chair. So the committee had one special nominations committee meeting this year in December, which was a joint meeting of the newly formed governance committee and the nominations committee. The focus of this meeting was to discuss the accountabilities and responsibilities of both committees and the relationship together. Certainly this new relationship the committee feels will advance the college decisions around best practices and innovations in the assisting with recruitment of new council members. And the nominations committee looks forward to the opportunities that this will certainly bring. All our previous meetings for this year of COVID were held electronically and primarily by email communication. So this year, the call for nominations for new directors was sent out to members on September 24th with a November 5th, 2020 deadline. 4 positions were advertised: Labrador Grenfell Regional Councillor, Central Regional Councillor, Administrative Councillor, and Education Research Councillor. Those eligible included any registered nurses residing in the province and holding a practicing license in good standing. The slate of candidates was announced to the membership on November 27th. This year, as in past years, voting was paired with license renewal and conducted electronically by Jonathan Miller IT and TriWave Technologies Incorporated through myCRNNL.ca from January 19th to March 31st. This year, happily, we had no technical difficulties with the electronic module during the voting period. And results: 1,660 members voted this year, up again this year by a small amount, by 64 voters from last year. And this certainly is very promising, because previously, prior to electronic voting, we often had under 200 to 300 votes. So we're very encouraged by this, but we'll continue to work to increase the number of members who vote. So the results: 2 candidates were nominated for the Labrador Grenfell Regional Councillor position, and I'm pleased to announce that the successful candidate was Megan Hudson. 4 candidates were nominated for the Administrative Councillor position, and the successful candidate was Neil Coburn. 1 candidate was nominated for Central Councillor position, and Tracy MacDonald was acclaimed for this position. 1 candidate was nominated for the Education Research Councillor position, and Melissa Coburn was acclaimed for this position. All candidates, whether successful or not, were notified by phone in early April by the chair of the Nominations Committee. The Nominations Committee would like to thank and acknowledge all those nurses who let their names stand for office, and congratulate Tracy, Neil, Melissa, and Megan, and wish them all the best in their coming term on council. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow committee members and CRNNL staff, Christine Fitzgerald, for all her ongoing support over the past year. And we certainly look forward to working further to increase voting over this year. Thank you very much, Tracy, and back to you.
Thank you, Elaine, and the members of the Nominations Committee. I now will call on John to explain how voting will be conducted. John?
Thanks, everyone. So we are going to be using WebEx's polling option here tonight. Shortly now, once we move into this motion, I will open up the poll. It should pop open for you on your screen with basically a yay or nay option. So what we're going with tonight, where you will see the wording of on motion number X, I vote yay is in favor of the motion, nay is not in favor of the motion. If you wish to abstain, just don't vote. We will track yourself that way. I know I have 3 computers here that will not be voting and abstaining, and I will keep a look at the numbers from there. I will note that you have to press your answer, so yay or nay, and then submit to be sure it's logged in, but we'll be following along after we open up that first poll in a second. If it doesn't pop up automatically for you, you should see a red dot appear near the lower right-hand side of your screen that will try to lead you into the polling option there. But if you don't see it, let us know in the chat, and we'll help it. We'll make sure we keep everything open until you have a chance to vote.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'll read the motion. Motion number 1, to accept the report of the nominations committee and to delete the electronic ballots 1 week post the annual meeting, noting that generic demographic voting data shall be retained for trending analysis. So moved by Kimberly Legg and seconded by Glenn George. Any discussion on the motion? John will take over here if there's anyone who needed to unmute themselves.
I will say if there's anyone...
Or in the chat?
Yep, in the chat, you can use the chat. You can also, at the bottom of the participants list, you should see a little hand button that will let you raise your virtual hand if you would like to be flagged to be unmuted for any comments. You can get us through any of those methods. I'm not seeing any at the moment. I'm going to look at the have a look at the panelists or attendee list. And I am not seeing any hands up or comments in the chat at the moment.
Okay. I now call for a vote on this motion.
We'll be opening the poll now. You should see the poll open. Yes, we're finding it. Record time. I am seeing we have 80% of our group online have voted, and it is unanimously in favor of that one. We'll leave it open for another 10-15 seconds to make sure everybody has had a chance to find it. No votes in progress. I'm going to close that. And we are showing completely in favor.
Motion is carried. Thank you, John. Moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is the audited financial statements. I am pleased to welcome LYNN Littlejohn, the college's Director of Corporate Services, who is with us this evening for the presentation of the financial statements. I also acknowledge online the presence of Lori Pittman, Chartered Accountant with CPMG, who are our auditing firm. The college's summary financial statements for the year ending March 31st, 2021 are included in the annual report starting on page 19. Approval of the full statements by the College Council occurred at our meeting June 3rd, 2021 and are now posted on the college's website. I call upon Lana Littlejohn to present the audited financial statements. Lana?
Thank you, Tracy. Okay. Copies of the financial statements, as Tracy had said, are posted with your meeting materials. They are on the website, and this year we've got the summarized form actually included in the annual report. So what are financial statements? Financial statements form part of the auditor's report and are really a report card. Very timely, given that it's June. It's a report card that tells us how the organization performed over the year. The parts of the financial statements are the auditor's report that tells us whether the numbers are accurate and whether you should have any concerns about the future operation of the business. The financials themselves, which is the statement of financial position or the balance sheet. The statement of earnings, did the revenue cover expenses? The statement of cash flows, which is a report on the sources and uses of cash. And finally, then the notes to the financial statements that gives details about the numbers. Sometimes a little bit extra explanation or narrative is needed. So the auditors of the firm KPMG gave their opinion in their independent auditor's report that the statements as prepared by CRNNL are free of material misstatement and in keeping with the required accounting standards. The statement of financial position on page 1 of the financial report reports the college's position at March 31st. This statement on page 1 of your package shows what we own in assets, such as cash, investments, and capital tangible assets like the building and computers. And you may ask, why is cash and cash equivalents so high at around $4 million this year and last year? Well, that is because when you have a January to March renewal period, all of your cash comes in at this particular time of the year, and it has to cover 12 months of operations. So the December cash position is quite different from the March 31st cash position. Cash is, however, up from last year as we were able to reduce our expenses and keep more in our high interest savings account. Also, we actually had more members renew for the 2021-22 year by year end. So that meant cash was up at March 31st, but so was our liability of deferred revenue. That was up correspondingly. Our investments are up because of the unrealized gain, and that is a market value of our investments are up. Now we look at what we owe. This includes what we owe our vendors, our members, the government, and our employees at March 31st. The deferred revenue is a liability we owe to our members, and that's for their licenses that are effective the day after the statement date. So as I said, it's a picture at March 31st, but remember your license renewal is, or the effective date of your license is April 1st. As I said, we had more members renew this year prior to April 1. And the net assets are all the internally restricted funds, such as the conduct review plan and the building contingency, plus an unrestricted amount. So the next component of the financial statements is the statement of operations. Overall, revenue is very similar to last year, even with interest revenue down due to COVID, but our number of licenses were up. Expenses overall are up, but this is due to several areas of increase offset by other areas of decrease. As you can see, salaries, for example, are up, and this is due to the 2% salary increase, as well as CNA fees, or our affiliation fees, are up as well. And communications was up due to the improved, newly designed website. These increases were offset by lower costs associated with our discipline process. Legal costs are down due to fewer and virtual hearings. As well, counsel costs were down due to virtual hearings, and practice is down from prior year due to fewer workshops related to COVID. We did have to recognize gains in the change of the market value of our sold investments, and that's in the amount of $27,000. That's the realized gain. We also had to report $249,000 in unrealized gains. The unrealized gain is required to be reported, but it's not a real gain until the investment is sold. It is reported to be the difference between what we paid for an asset or for an investment and its market value at March 31st. We would actually try to hold every investment so that it could be sold at or higher than market value, or higher than cost. The COVID effect on the prior year's market value is the sole reason for this huge gain this year. Also highlighted on this statement is the proceeds received from insurance following a flood that we had at the College House in July 2020. This required several assets to be written off and repurchased, as well as the building restoration. The loss on the disposal of assets is the result of writing off assets such as computers before their useful life is up. The overall excess of revenue over expenditures of $472,000 allowed us to increase our targeted reserves, primarily the building fund and the PCR fund, as was the plan back in 2011 when the last membership fee increase was supported by our members. The next statement is the statement of changes in net assets. And you can see here too the effect of the dollar collected from all of our members for the Ways and Means Plan, as well as the dollar from all licenses for the Global Member Services Plan. This statement is meant to give you an indication of how much CRNNL either added to or depleted its net assets, and enables you to see the available resources for future service delivery. As you can see, the college has been able to add to the building and conduct review funds. The next statement is the statement of cash flows. It's on page 4 of your financial statements, and these have got to be the harder of the financial statements to understand. Essentially, it explains the sources and the uses of cash, the increases and the decreases in cash, how much was generated and how much was used. For example, the excess of revenue over expenses of $472,000 is a source of cash. The increase in accounts payable means that we have new cash because we did not use cash to pay down bills owed, such as employee vacation benefits. The statement helps us to understand the organization's cash viability in order to meet debt and continue as a going concern. So our statement shows that we did not experience any cash shortfalls during the year as a result of bills being due, and any excess cash we had, we put in investments. The notes to the financial statements on page 5 of the report, you probably have already referred to some of those, but they're there to give you further clarification. I won't go through them all, but as users of statements, you need to understand that the notes give you a more comprehensive assessment of the college's financial condition. The note for subsequent events is related to the pandemic's effect on the statements, such as the closure of our building. And a new note this year was added, number 7, explaining the flood that we experienced in July and its related costs. So in summary, the important thing is we got a clean audit opinion and we're able to complete our mandate as a regulatory body to continue to build the reserves for council-directed funds. And we'll be opening the floor to questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you to Lana and Lori and members of the Finance and Audit Committee. I now call on John to explain again how voting will be conducted for approval of the auditors. John?
Thank you, Tracy. Just like the first one, we'll be going to our polls for this one. Same setup as motion number 1. This time on motion number 2, I vote choose yay and press submit for in agreement, choose nay and press submit for in disagreement with it. And if you are abstaining from the vote, just don't do anything. I will be opening that poll. I think we'll be ready to open the poll on your call.
Yep, thank you, John. I'll read the motion. The motion is to reappoint KPMG as CRNNL's auditor for the fiscal year ends 2022 up to and including 2024. Any discussion on the motion? I'll let John keep an eye to the chat.
Okay. Same. I'm going to open up the phone line as well.
The conference is now in talk mode.
Hi.
Hello. Do you have any comment on the motion?
The conference is now in silent mode.
And I'm not seeing any hands online on WebEx or anyone in the chat.
Okay, thank you, John. I now call for a vote on this motion.
Opening the poll now.
It's moved by Pat Rogers and seconded by Kelly Barron.
We're close to having 80% of our vote in. I'll give everyone about 5-10 seconds for anyone that's finding it. Right. And we're going to close this with, once again, we have one person looks like they're in progress. Let them finish.
So John will display the results.
It's giving 15 seconds to anyone that was finishing out there, but it's looking as we have unanimous consent for this one again.
Thank you. Motion is carried. The next item of business is the Executive Director's Operational Report found on pages 8 to 18 in the annual report, and the PowerPoint is on the screen and available on the website. Questions and comments will be addressed during the open discussion forum. I now call upon Lynn Power, Executive Director of the College, to present the annual report. Lynn?
Well, hello, everybody, and it is roasting here, so I have to start with that. When you get the privilege of taking off your mask, it actually is a bit of a relief. So thank you. I'll re-echo Tracy's words. Thank you to everybody who took the time out today to join us. I'm going to touch on some of the operational components, but again, it's all found in the annual report, which is online, so if you want to read a bit more on it, you certainly are encouraged to do so. So this is again covering the fiscal year that ended at March the 31st. So I think it's important for you to understand that the way I'll be presenting it is through the main 3 strategic outcomes that Council have identified to set the priorities for the work that the college does. So there'll be data represented in each of the 3 areas and just different examples of products that we received. So basically, I'll start with public confidence in self-regulation. And just for you to understand or appreciate some of the directives that Council identified under this strategic outcome, it really talks about governance and regulatory processes and programs and services are objective, fair, relevant, credible, etc. So they are very specific indicators in this category that I'll touch on. But a lot of them relate to numbers. And as Lana indicated in her financial commentary, that our membership was up, and this is the data to show you where that actually increase was. So it's only a 1.6% increase in the practicing registrants compared to last year. And you'll see on this chart, we roughly have been in the 6,200 to 6,300 range for the period of time that's displayed here for 5 years. So the number was 6,327. What's important for you to understand is that 93% of this membership are annual license renewal. So we do actually keep and retain a large percentage of our membership year over year. Another figure to help you understand where this number comes from is this year in particular we had 263 graduates from the School of Nursing programs, and that can range a little bit from year to year. And just other people coming back from lapsed or other Canadians moving back into Canada, back into Newfoundland from different parts of Canada will make up a figure, and our internationally educated nurses. Very small percentage. We actually had 9 get a license last year with us, but there were 32 in the queue, put it that way, if you're looking for people. That figure does not include the emergency licensures. The emergency license is a temporary license that was just initiated in our regulations that we could issue to assist with the pandemic response. So there was about 86 emergency licenses issued in that licensure year. There's been a few more since, as in April 1 on. A small percentage of those did go on, though, to get a full practicing license. They actually stayed on in an employment setting beyond the conditions of that licensure. Our nurse practitioners, this number tends to go up in significant leaps because it's a small number. So it was about a 14.4% increase in NPs. So you'll see that we topped out at year end at 222, and the vast majority of them are in the family, all ages. NPs, though, account for about 3.5% of our total membership. Few more slides that I'm just going to present to give you the profile of our workforce. Just again, like there's lots of details in the annual report, but I'll just show this one because we keep talking about aging demographic and an aging workforce. So this basically shows you, if you look at the graph on the far right is 2021, but if you look at the last bar in every single one of them, that's the over 60 group. And it's always been around 6.7, 6.2. This year it was 6.4%. So it has stayed steady in those that are practicing over the age of 60. Our average age of our registrants is 42.6. It's the youngest in the country. So some of the demographics on the age are interesting to trend. But of those that are 60 plus, about 65% of them are either casual or part-time. Another demographic of interest that we trend, and one of the important things to know about CRNNL is that we have the access to data, and we provide that data to various sources based on need, research, inquiry from workforce planning, etc. So this one just shows that we have about 63%, just over that now are graduates of the baccalaureate and in the diploma, which I am one originally. It's 26.8% left. But then of note, we're starting to see a little bit of a climb in our PhD programs and our other post-basic programs. So this is always encouraging and exciting to see when we start looking at the number engaged in continuing education. Another important role of the college is the entry to practice examinations, both for the baccalaureate program and the nurse practitioner program. And these two charts simultaneously here will show you roughly our pass rates for the last 5 years. And you can see they're significantly in the high range. So with the NCLEX exam, we have a lot more writers. This year, we're reporting it was about a 91.6%. And the CNPE, which is a very small pool, has been running, between the 80 to 100. It really doesn't take much to skew those numbers off. But it is a significant pass rate, and it is notably high comparatively across the country. Another part of public confidence in self-regulation and a part of the processes required in administering the RN Act and the regulations is a part of the continuing competency requirements. And this figure just shows you the participants in the audit, which is also a legislative requirement, roughly running around 300 now for the last 3 years. And of those, if you look at the second line there, that, a fair percentage reach the initially met all requirements. Just only a small percentage need further follow-up for clarity either around the processes, what they submit, and unfortunately, there's always a few that do not participate in that and then would fall into the other part of our work, which I'm going to talk about now, the professional conduct review processes. So this slide just depicts that there's a number of steps. The PCR process is certainly something, again, that's outlined in legislation in the RN Act, and there are very prescribed processes to follow along. So the data that's in the annual report will talk about the number of allegations, the review process, how they're screened, which route they went to resolution, and then ultimately what percentage might have went on to a tribunal. I'm just going to pause a second and just say that this is a critical part of the work of the college. It's a part that's in our mandate, and it is clearly outlined, as I said, in the RN Act. And we just recently did a public survey to reach out to the public to find out their understanding of our mandate, our role, and an opinion on how well we do our role. We did ask them about their awareness of some of our functions, and one of them was around our role in the discipline process. 61% of the respondents, it's a randomized telephone survey of about 400 people, that it's that's not great, but it's not bad. But however, of those 61%, 79% had indicated that they had confidence or were very confident that we would actually intervene as appropriate in those circumstances. So that's encouraging for you all to know as members of the self-regulated profession. So just a few slides to show you the profile of this past year. There were 49 allegations that were received in this year, and you can see the little bit of up and down, but it's pretty well on track. And of those, I'll note that about 4% came from the public. The vast majority still come from the employers, and some of them will actually be CRNNL initiated, as in the example of the CCP I met. The requirement for something to get into the PCR process is the term conduct deserving of sanction. That is defined quite well in our bylaws in an appendix, and it's got various categories. And so this diagram just shows you where the various allegations that came in fell. And you will see most are related to professional misconduct. And there's a detail on page 12 of the annual report if you want to look at some of the examples that might fall under these categories. This slide just gives you a little snapshot of where we finished at year end in our PCR processes. I will tell you though, this is not, you're not going to be able to take your little figures and add this up to the 49 because sometimes individuals may be in the process for initiated the year before, something may be resolved relevant to any part of a cycle. But you can see there was 4 tribunals held in the period. That definitely is accurate. And you will also see there was a fair number that fall under what we call attempts to resolve. So you're talking about your ADR process, and that's really reflective of right touch regulation and doing what needs to be done to resolve the issue in the public interest, but not overhand it. And on that same note, in 2019 of September, the quality assurance program of the college came into effect, and we had our first people that went through it. We had 4 that were referred to it over the year, and 3 are completely resolved by year end. And there's 1 more in between. I will tell you it's a very small number, but the individuals who went through it certainly reflected that they felt they learned, and it was progressive and supportive. A little note at the end of this public confidence and self-regulation is we launched a new procedure this year, a new process, and it was called a complaints facilitator. The 3 logos here are really to reflect that we did it in collaboration with the College of LPNs and the Pharmacy Board. And really that is a new role, and it's designed to be inclusive. It's designed that if there's a need expressed or identified, a complaints facilitator would be available to a member of the public to assist an individual in putting their concern in writing. It's required in the legislative processes that it is in writing, and we certainly would not want to be seen as a barrier if someone was unable to do that. So this is an enabling role. It just launched, and we're pleased to have done it with some of our other health regulator partners. The second strategic outcome that I'll just make some commentary on is labeled accountable professionals. And the indicators that fall under this particular heading all relate to RNs and NPs practicing safely, collaboratively, consistent with the standards of code, working to full scope, meeting their continuing competency and their professional development. So that's roughly the areas that it fall under. And I'm very pleased to say in that same public survey I mentioned earlier, 92% of those members of the public who had contact, excluding any contact for COVID, in this period of time, 92% were very or satisfied with the quality of care they received. We broke that down in all kinds of areas, but kudos out. That certainly is encouraging feedback. So this slide just sort of puts a snapshot of some of the portfolios that fall underneath this. And of note, in this past year, there was 4 documents published. There's a fair bit of consultation that occurs with these documents, so doing that in a COVID year is certainly commendable to the team. But also there was certain things that were driven by COVID in terms of need. Virtual nursing practice, we've certainly had that on our books, but it had to go live pretty soon in this year. So really pleased that was one of the documents. We had to clarify things around self-employment. There was advanced foot care, and that was very specific to an essential service that was identified early in COVID, and the need that be continued. And certainly there was some updating of our documents ongoing, as an example, the medication management. Of note, the team actually engaged in educational sessions with over 800 registrants in this period. So they did over 230 virtual presentations. And separate from that, they actually engaged with approximately 700 students, whether it was the baccalaureate or the nurse practitioner. So there was an interest in learning about the expectations and roles and responsibilities of a professional, and the team certainly responded. I'll also show you in this data, and this is basically practice calls. So the number of calls that come into the office and a disposition of those calls. And you can see there a fair number come in around scope of practice, continuing competency, self-employment. So there certainly is, the virtual nursing was certainly a popular one this year. The other category may fit something very specific like documentation or something like on delegation or whatnot. But that's just a portfolio, an overview. Get it out, Lynn. I will take a moment just to tell you that a big part of the year's agenda had been that we have a new continuing competency program, and that was not able to roll out last year. It was approved by the council the year before, but due to the inability to get out in workplaces and talk to people and really do the education and communication necessary, that was delayed, and we're really hopeful that this will get started the fall. And we always like to note that we're really pleased to be have a formal program, but also be engaged with the students. And the College Student Representative Program has been on the go for a number of years. And, you know, it actually has all three of the baccalaureate and the fast track, and they have a representative from each year. It's always a full program. This year they added a student from the IEN Bridging Reentry Program. So just kudos to the team for all being engaged. So the last strategic outcome that I'll give you some operational data for the year on is called Evolution of the Profession. Now, this is not an advocacy one. This is one that talks about, in the indicators that council have set, is that the regulatory body is setting up the regulatory requirements to meet the future needs of the population. So this is trying to look out there a little bit, vision a bit, find out where there may be opportunities for roles that can add to the contribution that registered nurse practitioners can do to the profession. I'll highlight a few here. There's a fair bit of work underway nationally. So this is working with the college, the Council of Registered Nurse Regulators, CCRNR, on a massive project on nurse practitioners. And the project is going to have multiple components intertwined, national standards, national entry-level competencies, continuing competency requirements that are right across the board, and an entry-level exam. So you'll see there's an actual website specific to this particular area. If you want to read a little bit more, there's certainly lots of engagement ongoing on this area. I mentioned RN prescribing because we've had, you know, it's been a while. It's been talked about. There's been, it's been introduced in various other jurisdictions, and we did get the wording in the Act that allowed us to progress with that. But now we need to have the regulations, and of course, obviously, as a province, there was certainly more pressing issues than moving forward on this in terms of government regulations. However, we're on target. We've been having meetings of advisory groups. We've been developing some principles, and we certainly have interest in government to move forward. So we're really hoping that will move forward this year, but it's just important for you to realize it. And the last thing I'll touch on in this third strategic outcome is really the public policy role. And our mandate in public policy is really to help advance, as I said, the roles that RNs and NPs will play in order to improve population health. So these are just a couple of the partners that we work with. You could see there we certainly have been heavily engaged in the provincial opioid dependence treatment center of excellence work, Safer Meds NL. There's lots of dissemination, communication of information, posting of things on our website, same way with Quality of Care, Newfoundland and Labrador. I'll mention Health Canada. They're huge in COVID for the dissemination of the best practices and evidence that's coming out. Public Health Association, we're proud to be a member and work with that group, and that might be something like food security. So it's a diversity of different things we work on, all to advance population health. And I'll just note the Health Accord that I'm pleased to be sitting on the Community Care Committee of the Health Accord, so we're pleased to be contributing to that. So I guess it would be remiss if I didn't make a commentary, and it's actually well outlined in the annual report, that this is certainly the year of trying to work with the pandemic. I mentioned the emergency license, but I will say from a public policy point of view, been lots happening. I'll use the word surge capacity. We did a course where we own the data and the database, and we have access to registered nurses retiring, different ages, different parts of the region, different roles. We've certainly helped do the call for nurses to come back to come forth to help at various points in the last year and into this year. We certainly, the practice response, I indicated the virtual document, but there's also been a lot of calls as people work through some of the issues as they go back. We've certainly been out in the media on vaccinations and the importance of vaccinations and the importance of listening to public health guidelines. And certainly these are just a sample of the public policy, but we've certainly been involved with numerous stakeholders in different consultations throughout the year to help guide the system as they move through implementing, or pivoting is the key word in this year, to what they needed to do for to accommodate. So where we could help, we helped. And we're pleased to be a part of that, and we're also, pleased to help in a continuing format. I do want to just do a little close here, and I'm going to put on my reading glasses just so I can read it, because it's certainly something I want to comment on accurately. I will say, prior to turning it over to the college chair, I would like to take this opportunity to state very clearly on the record how very much I appreciate the work done by all facets of our operation. To the council that governs this organization, thank you for being versatile, patient, and generous with your time. We live in an ever-changing world in which an organization's ability to attract and retain high-quality volunteers is daunting. So the fact that we have such a dedicated and dependable, especially during this crazy time, is a significant asset. Thank you. To all the team at the college, you deserve to be commended for never ceasing to lose sight of your duty and continuously improving on the standard of your work, despite the circumstances. And the flood, by the way, was a toilet broke on the second floor, in case you're all curious about that. I can save that question by answering it now. But we were in and out of the office 3 different times during this period, again, maintaining all the requirements. And finally, I do want to say to everybody out there, everybody on the front line, everybody on every part of the team, everybody had to work hard during this pandemic, pivot where they needed to pivot, consult, work together, come up with solutions. I will say that the gratitude expressed by the entire province cannot be underscored. These past 12 months have been trying for all and many and all of the public. Yet I feel confident in stating that the standard of excellence was most certainly met and in many cases surpassed. Everybody played a major role in keeping this province safe, and I think our profession was a key player in all that. On behalf of the college, we want to thank everyone, and thank you for listening to the presentation today. I will pass it back over to Tracy, and as I said, I'll take any questions when we get to the open discussion forum.
Thank you, Lynn, very much. It took me about 20 minutes to find my glasses, 5 minutes to take my mask off, so by the time the meeting's done, I'll probably have my act together. Forgive me. So the next piece on the agenda, and I meant to say at the beginning that you know, we are committed to being on time. We may finish a little early. We certainly are appreciative of people giving up a couple of hours on such a nice evening. So it looks like we're making great time, so that's perfect. And I have the bigger version here so I can actually read it. I'll just go back to the beginning. So just to continue what Lynn has kind of left as a nugget for us this evening, it's hard not to reflect on the past year and not mention COVID-19 and the pandemic. And, you know, through just preparing for tonight and reflecting on the words that I'd want to leave with those that are listening, and James said today that people may see these videos in years to come. Many of you guys may not know, but I know there are people on the line that know that I'm a mom of 4 children, 4 teenagers now. I feel like I'm in the apocalypse on top of COVID, and they think I'm really old. So I don't think I'm that old, but they think I'm really old. So when James said today, you know, we are living in history, I thought, wow, that's a really nice way to look at that, because in years down the road, when we look back to 2020, we will all be reflecting of living through history. And then I can tell my kids that they're old. Now, I'll be much older, but I'm just thinking ahead of how I can spin this. So as we look across what's happened in the world, as we look at what's happened in our province and our country, it has been an exhausting year. It's been a difficult year. I think we have so much to be proud of in our own province. And as Lynn has highlighted, you know, the tremendous work that still continued. We all shifted, pivoted, and took the crisis as an opportunity and rose to that challenge. I think there's many words that come to mind, but certainly from the opportunities to rise up, to respond, to be efficient and effective in the things that we could do. Right now, it feels that we can look forward with hope. And hope even today as the announcement that the bubble will open, and we know the rest of Canada in the coming weeks if things stay as they are, which is just so important for us all to be able to connect with our families again. So just to echo what Lynn has said, it has been a pivotal year, and a year in which we have looked back with gratitude, and now we can look forward with hope. I want to introduce the College Council of the past year. The names may be a little small to read. Myself, Tracy, who I've introduced, Glenn George, who's our Vice Chair and Public Representative. And I think it's really important for us to particularly highlight that we also made history by having a Vice Chair as a public rep. So we're so thankful for all of our public reps, and especially Glenn, as taking on that significant role as Vice Chair. Stephen Clark and Louise Pinson-Parsons are our other public representatives. Pat Rogers for the Eastern Region, Donna Luther, Western Region, Stacey Knutson, Labrador Grenfell Region, Kelly Barron, Advanced Practice, Krista Sims, Practice, Valerie Golding, Education and Research, Crystal Northcott, Administration, Kim Legg and Tanya Ryan, both at large positions, and of course you've just heard from Lynn, our Executive Director for the college. Lynn has touched on the strategic outcomes in her operations report, and the strategic outcomes are really the guiding principles that talk about why we do what we do, which is our mandate, which is public protection. They are how we do our work, and we follow the Act to ensure that what we're doing is safe. Public confidence and self-regulation, as Lynn highlighted some of those specific indicators, accountable professionals, and evolution of the profession. And I can tell you hands down, my involvement on council, you won't meet a more visionary leader than under Lynn in terms of how she's thinking 20 steps ahead. And I always thought I was thinking ahead, but I can't keep up sometimes with Lynn. The governance highlights. Certainly last year we held our 66th annual general meeting of the College Registered Nurses of Newfoundland, and that was virtual. As I said, I remember sitting in the boardroom and we were talking about a virtual meeting, and I thought, I wonder how that's going to go off. And then we think of the past year and, you know, how quickly we pivoted. And now, you know, many of us may work from home or work from offices, and we spend a lot of time doing virtual meetings. The operating of this year also saw, as I highlighted, the election of a new chair and a vice chair, which I've highlighted, GLYM, which, you know, we continue to make history, and held virtual meetings in June, October, and March. I should say that generally these presentations have lots of pictures of things that council would have done throughout the year. And maybe if we continue in virtual platforms, we might take some pictures of us virtually, but that's why there's no pictures in our presentation, because we did follow the public health measures and took the virtual platform. I will highlight the 3 new additions to our council, which happened over this past year. Ms. Donna Luther for the Western Region Councillor, and she's a returning council member, so people may go off council, but they come back, so I think that's a testament to the fantastic group that we work with. Kimberly Legg, Councillor at Large, and as well Tanya Ryan, Councillor at Large, who is also a returning council member. So we've had a very busy year. Despite the challenges, work must go on. Our June meeting of 2020, we approved the bylaw amendments related to the emergency licensure. And even though LYNN highlighted that as, you know, a pivotal thing that we were able to rise up to last year, it really showed how we could respond to a need. In addition to that, it also spoke to the work and how quickly things could be pulled together to ensure that we could, as a province, stick to our mandate, which is providing looking at the public for safety. Council accepted the Strategic Outcomes Monitoring Report, and high on our agenda for the next year is to start looking at some more strategic planning. Council also approved the scope of practice of a registered nurse who's issued an interim NP license. Our meeting in October, we voted to discontinue the honorary membership to better reflect the organization's role as a regulatory body. And certainly the second bullet, Council has also looked at the movement of funds to invest for our registrants and our public in revamping our website, which we all you know, can look to and be able to access and be user-friendly as we evolve. Our meeting in March of this past year, there's a couple of items here. The Council repealed the call for resolutions and motions, which takes place at the annual general meeting, and really to ensure that there's a mechanism that continues of collaboration and opportunity to ask questions. That's why we have highlighted a section of the AGM tonight for a question and answer forum. Memorial University's Nurse Practitioner Program received a Gold Star review and a full 7-year approval from the college. The annual reports for the IEN reentry and the BM programs were also positively received by Council. The Canadian Nurses Association presented to Council during this meeting changes to their governance and membership model, and further information will be released to registered nurses at the CRNNL AGM, which is coming up this week. Council voted to create a community reference group intended to guide the college to gain public input on regulatory policies and processes. And the College Council also approved the budget for the 2021-22 fiscal year. In conclusion, I would like to take this moment to express for the record just what a privilege it has been to serve as a chair of the College Council. The world we live in is ever-changing, and subsequently the world of regulation is no exception to this. It is incredible to think 2021 marks the 67th year that an AGM was held for the former association and now the present college. In reflecting on this fact, I cannot help but marvel at the change that has occurred, not just over the span of 67 years, but most especially in the recent years. Change that we have embraced and change that benefits Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. What it means to be a registered nurse is evolving. The health of our provincial population is progressing, and I truly believe we are witnessing a transformation of our college as it emerges as a vital cog in the overall machine that is our healthcare system and our society. The efforts we have made in the past number of years have set us on a course for the future, and these efforts are as a result of council comprised of dedicated volunteers and a team of diligent and hardworking staff. You are to be commended for all that you do. Finally, before we get into the Q&A, I want to thank all of you who are in attendance this evening. Your interest and contribution is immensely appreciated. For those that know me in my work life, I am a registered nurse and I work in patient safety. And I coined, or I like to use in many of my presentations, a little term. It's called, are you safe or are you lucky? And as I reflect on my year as chair with the college, I think Newfoundland and Labradorians can really say that we are safe. And I feel so lucky to be a part of this team. Thank you very much. Good? Good to go, John? I feel like my kids now, if they could turn off the mic. Someday they're going to see this video. I know they will. So moving on to our agenda item, it's the open discussion and forum, and we've allotted 30 minutes for that. So for this piece, I'm actually going to sit down at the table, and we'll do the questions as they come in through the chat. So I think that's how we're going to work it, John, is we'll use the chat forum. Are we opening up the lines as well?
Yes, so I'll,
Okay.
if you want to get comfortable at your other seat, I'll take a second here. I'll say to, and I will mute that one. There we go. To everyone online, so our panelists, our council members, you have the ability to unmute yourself at any point if you want to chime in on an answer for a question or chime in on an answer. For our attendees on WebEx, as I said, you can put it in the chat. Please send it to the host, myself, John Duff, and I will repeat it here in the room for our group. As well, you can raise your hand at the bottom of the participants list to be unmuted to ask a question. For anyone that is on the phone on AccuTel, we will be opening up that line on a couple of occasions. You can, if you are muted on there, you can press *4 to unmute yourself when we do open that up. But I do have a question in from the audience first, if we want to start on one here. I will pose that. It is, could you please provide some background on reasoning for discontinuing the practice of members being able to submit motions at AGMs? And I'll make sure I have all the mics on in the room.
Okay, so I'll start, and then you can fill in. So, as indicated in pieces of, I guess, our presentations this evening, we are in a pivotal time in shifting away from association and being very laser focused in terms of our mandate and self-regulation. So we have moved away from some traditional models, Carver being one of them, in terms of where motions would come forward, which tends to be more affiliated with association type work. And to make things a little cleaner, a little clearer, and crisper, that really is the crux of why the decision was made. And, you know, just, I guess, to put it on the table as well, 2020, there were no motions as well. So, Lynn, is there something else you'd like to add to that as well?
No, I think you covered it, and there haven't been a few for a few years, but it also can get confusing sometimes in the sense that it's great dialogue, great discussion, and this is what this forum is meant to be. Bring forward anything you want to raise, but it doesn't have to be at an annual general meeting. It could be any time during the year. It could be any linkage or any council meeting or anything you might want to raise. There was no requirement in the Act to do it, as I said, because it was an association feature. So it was just to try to open it up a little bit more. There were some people maybe indicated intimidation by the process of the wording of resolutions and motions and moving and seconding and getting it right. So the goal was to keep us moving, as Tracy indicated, that we hadn't seen any in a while, but we also thought it would be more engaging to be open and receptive at any point in time throughout the year. So it was a process as we're moving along, but hopefully people will engage through the other mechanisms.
Excellent. We have a next question here. Lynn, you mentioned the new CCP program is coming this fall. Can you comment on the proposed changes, or is it all a work in progress?
No, it's worked out. Council approved the process with it. The only thing in this particular time this evening, I think maybe it's better for me to refer you to the website. There's some information that are up there, or maybe give us the team a call to get through some of the details. But we did do an extensive evaluation of the current CCP program. It had been in place. The program itself had been in place for numerous years, and the audit then we learned a lot from, which has been in place for about 6 years. So from all that data and all that evaluation, we heard that the program itself was a bit cumbersome. The forms were a bit, not so user-friendly. People were not completing them as was intended, so there was some miscommunication. So we tried to streamline the processes. So you should see a cleaner, leaner program. The other piece with it is to look at just-in-time recording. So rather than a retrospective look or a planning in the beginning of the year for that I want to work on X, it will be set up such that I just attended this AGM and this is what I learned. You flick in your time, write what you learned from it right at the moment, and then just be a summative evaluation at the end. So it was in response to a lot of feedback we got. It was also going to be framed up differently, and we are hoping with the launch of our website that we may be able to have an electronic portal. If not this year, we will next year, that people will be able to upload their information and make it more on-the-spot learning, reflective of what continuing competence is supposed to be.
I think more comment. Last year, during the early days of COVID, there were no resolutions, but I believe there have been several each year prior to that. Anything beyond that? We do have another question here. Do the things learned need to be linked to standards like they are now?
Assume that's related to the continuing competence program.
Yes, it is. Sorry.
No. I mean, clearly you are to frame your professional practice looking at your standards and your code of ethics and think about that on a regular basis for all your actions. But this is going to be more designed to be contextual. So what you are learning in your environment, great example. Everybody could fill out every line of their CCP for last year related to what they've learned for COVID. So it will be based upon your environment, your circumstances, and so that's the structure.
Perfect. Next one. CRNNL recognizes they no longer have the role of a professional association. When CRNNL was ARNNL, members voted on membership fees. Some of the professional association fee, probably should be membership fees. Some of the professional association fees went to purchases such as ARNNL House. I think it is timely that an external auditor separate the assets of the regulatory body and the professional association. Can this please be done?
Actually, using auditors, the advice of auditors, I did some homework on that, and according to Bill 57, which is the act that amended the Registered Nurses Act, the Association of Registered Nurses is continued under the name of the College of Registered Nurses of Newfoundland and Labrador as a corporation without share capital. So what this means is that it's a continuation of the assets, and so that means that the assets of the association become the assets of the college, as does the debt of the association became the debt of the college. So it is, there's no breaking out the ARNNL assets versus the college because it's a continuation of the same organization.
Okay, this is probably a good chance to open up the phone lines. I will remind anyone that is listening on the AccuTel, if you want to press *4 to unmute yourself.
Conference is now in talk mode.
And if you want to mute yourself, you can press *4 as well. Anyone on our phone line have any questions for the group?
The conference is now in silent mode.
I'll say no questions from the phone at the moment. We do have another one on WebEx here. I think this is a follow-up to our last question. Why then did some other regulatory bodies separate their funds when they became regulatory bodies?
I'll speak to that for a minute, just to say. So certainly, you know, these are healthy questions, and we should always have this kind of dialogue. But recognizing that there was different experiences that people were aware of or thought they were aware of related to various jurisdictions, we did reach out to those association jurisdictions that changed to find out what was happening. There was different models in different jurisdictions, but it was never a separation of assets per se. It wasn't defined that way or identified that way. There were operating grants given back as early as the 2012 in BC. Manitoba also provided an upstart operating grant to the new association that got established. So there was grants given to the organizations that put together to create an alternative model. So it didn't separate from it. It actually passed over a grant, a determined grant. I will also add that Manitoba, as an example, gave the association a loan, a significant loan, which they'll be paying back, obviously, with the arrangement that they have. That's certainly very fair. So there was some movement, but the movement was not a transfer of assets. There was one example I found throughout the changes across that there was a small fund that was identified for awards that was passed over. So I did do a review, and thank you for raising the questions, but I think the way it may have been presented might have been different. It was a recognition that there was a second group starting up in the province that was assuming some of the role, and in that assumption of the role, there was support towards that, whether it was a grant, a loan, it would vary differently. I will comment, CNA's annual meeting on Thursday is having a vote to change the membership structure from a jurisdictional member to an individual membership. So those associations certainly may continue in those jurisdictions, but one of the bigger startup components of that association was to be that bigger part of the Canadian Nursing Association and all its affiliates. So that model is not, it will change. In terms of another association starting in Newfoundland, Labrador, I've yet to hear of any organization. Certainly council would be open to have a conversation if a group was starting. There was an Atlantic group that looked at starting, but they deferred doing any action on it pending the outcome of the CNA meeting, because they've also been monitoring some of the struggles those newly founded associations have had in other jurisdictions when membership was voluntary. So we're watching the environment. If there is such a group that pulls together, we certainly might have some conversations, but there is no assets that were designated to be purely association, no assets that are held in that capacity, and the assets that the monies that were passed over were either a grant or a loan or for like a joint project.
Thank you, Lynn. I am seeing a couple of hands up in the audience. I'm going to just continue this line of questioning for one. We've got a couple of more clarifications in here from a couple of different attendees. The first is, if the association is continued, How is it discontinued? Is it discontinued for motions but continued for finances? And the second comment that was in is, can we be hopeful that CRNNL will be providing funds if there is a NL professional association?
I think the key to understanding what we're talking about here is our mandate in the RN Act and what we're given as our authority and our role. And our role is to license registered nurses, always has been since 1954, to discipline, to set up the competencies and the standards. You can look at the RN Act. So the mandate hasn't changed, that's what we do. It's some of the hows that have changed over time, and I can name a number of programs and services that altered over time. Think about our QPPE project as an example. So as we learn, as we evolve, as best practices in governance, as best practices in self-regulation, as threats to regulatory bodies, and as areas for growth to regulatory bodies change, we have sort of stayed watching, looking at what's going on in the times. So some of the changes are, as TRACY said, just a part of moving forward. It's not a cut off, finished component that this particular thing stopped. This motion was passed on the AGM resolutions and motions, but it actually had no authority. If you look at the functions of a regulatory body in the RN Act, it was a means that was available to put something on the table. This is the same means to raise something on the table. There was no accountability for council to act on it. It was an accountability promised to review it. So this keeps the same intent. So I think it's a transition. We're all learning. What do we mean by association? What do we mean by college? And I think there's a lot to learn from it and a lot to look at from others. But I think we're probably mixing a little bit of apples and oranges. TRACY, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
The only thing, thanks, Lynn, I thought that was a very thorough response. And as I said, continue on this path of getting pretty clear on our mandate and the separation of association and regulation, I think the second part of that comment or question was, what would the college, or is there a position that the college would have in supporting some of that work? And as Lynn had alluded to, I think conversations are warmly welcome moving forward. And, there's still some things to present itself over the coming days when we see what happens with the Canadian Nurses Association and their AGM as well. So much to how we arranged the agenda tonight was to allow for this robust discussion. And we're still learning and evolving as well. So no one's going to get this 100% perfect, but, we are pure to our mandate in terms of public protection, and that evolution is going to continue forward.
Perfect. I will go to one of our hands up users. Yvette, I'm going to unmute you now. You are on the air.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody. I have a question, and it's related to the public safety. And I know that you've seen me personally, out in the media as the Registered Nurses Union representative, talking about the nursing shortage and the areas where we're having major challenges, and I would call some areas crisis. Long-term care in St. John's, St. Anthony, they're trying to close ICU beds because of their nursing challenges, depending on transferring their patients out to the health science, but the health science can't take the patients because of overcapacity. And also areas like Carbonear closing a floor out there just recently. Goose Bay, people are resigning. 2 more resigned this week because the working conditions are so deplorable. And I know that CNA has come out talking about the nursing shortage, but I haven't heard CRNNL come out and talk about the impact that this is having on the patients and the people at large in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I'm just wondering if you could make a comment on that, about whether or not you would be entering into the public arena with that information.
Okay, so Tracy and I will both make some commentary. So thanks, Yvette, for raising it, and it's something that we certainly follow. You know what we're hearing in the media. We certainly, take note of it, especially as is raised around the patient safety issue. So it is something we would follow. However, it's not. It's not data that we know. It's not our workspace. It's not our mandate. What we know about is the numbers. I just showed that we actually had a 1.6% increase. I can show the data on where our ends are, what's the difference for the last 5 years. I can show their age in long-term care. We can do a profile. So we can contribute to the supply information. That's the data we have. We don't actually sit at any of the tables that discuss vacancies or that piece. We look forward to being involved in the provincial government as they roll up their HHR planning piece and would like to contribute. And we will provide the data to anybody who requires it, including yourself, which we did do when you started that campaign, gave you some profiles. So we certainly are aware of it, but right now what we know of in order to be able to respond in any way is the data that we have, which is not the table we sit at or the information that we have, because it's not in our mandate to do the employment side of pieces. So not probably a black and white answer for you, but it's just trying to clarify that, where our information is, what the data that we have, the role we play. That's what we can contribute at this moment.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks for that question, Yvette. And I guess I come at it from two ends. So first and foremost, as a registered nurse, connected to the front lines. And I think it's, I commend you on the marketing campaign. And it certainly speaks to, things that are happening on the ground. And that's kind of my one lens that I look at that as a personal note. I think just to extend on Lynn's point, when we look at our mandate in terms of public protection and what's within the RN Act, as well as, my role as chair and the role of council, it is a different focus and not completely connected. And as Lynn said, we don't sit at those tables and have those conversations, but we have an ability to provide the data which may be utilized and has been utilized to inform the public and move some of that work. So just wanted to add my 2 cents there.
Thank you, Yvette. I'm going to go next to our hand up. Sandra, we have your hand up here. I'm going to unmute you. You're on the air. You there, Sandra? Oh, I think Sandra has actually written her question as well, so I can repeat it for her here. We're wondering, would it be very beneficial to have sessions offered on how the association has changed to the college? An hour or so to increase understanding as a session offered in the future would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. There's been bits and pieces of information that has been brought out in programs and services, but no, there probably hasn't been a one sit down overall discussion. The AGMs probably provide that focus, and we've introduced the components over the years, so thank you. We certainly can consider that, especially as we, are able to get out and about and council can actually interact with people.
Perfect. Well, we do have another question in here. Can you please explain why all voting delegates at CNA's AGM this year will be held by CRNNL, as opposed to in previous year when members were invited to be a voting delegate?
We're playing a little bit of tag team. The information, I mean, we hold 10 votes at CNA. That's what we hold. The voting delegates, the maximum we could have vote is 10. The maximum we usually do an outcall for is usually 6 to 7. So there is a small percentage of the people that are members that would be attending a CNA AGM that would get that opportunity. It's especially important when we're physically present at CNA and we get an opportunity to caucus together, discuss some of the issues, and go along there. This year, the CNA, with their significant bylaw changes in their model, have been doing education sessions and outreach to try to describe to various audiences the particulars. And we've had some forums that we've hosted here. We've had smaller groups that we've had committees that we've invited them, including the board. And so the decision of the board this year was to, because this is so critical that this information is shared, that we would just hold those 10 votes. I don't think it's anything that's, you know, we've had other years when it was an off year that there was no physical conference, when CNA used to alternate between a physical conference and a short day version, that we've held those votes. So it's been a past practice that goes back many, many years, but it just used to alternate based upon the ability of nurses to attend. So it was just a timing, I think, and a knowledge base. I will say thank you. I did have a few people reach out and express interest in participating, because we've had lots of people participate before, so thank you for that. The board, you know, had to submit their voting delegates by the first week in May, and then the outreach, we weren't sure who had participated and what, and there was things still happening, so that was just the decision the board went with.
Excellent. No questions in the chat. I'll remind everyone that you can just put a question right into the chat. Raise your hand using the button at the bottom of the participants list. This is a good chance for me to open up the phone line for anyone who is connected there. I'll unmute you in here. I'll ask you to press *4. Anybody on the phone line have any questions?
Great idea.
Thank you.
The conference is now in silent mode.
So I'm not seeing any more in the chat. No more hands up at the moment. We want to give it a minute for anybody that may have any questions left. I am seeing none at the moment.
All good to go, John? Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for the questions. And as indicated earlier in our agenda, if questions come up after, you can always reach out to LYNN as the Executive Director, and she can filter those down through to Council as need be. So the next item on the agenda is the introduction of the College of Registered Nurses of Newfoundland Labrador's Council for 2021-2022. So myself, Tracy MacDonald, as Chair, Glenn George, Vice Chair, Public Representative, Stephen Clark, Public Representative, Louise Pinsent Parsons, Public Representative, and nursing councillors are as follows: Kimberly Legg, Tanya Ryan, Patricia or Pat Rogers, Donna Luther, Megan Hudson, Krista Sims, Kelly Barron, Neil Colburn, Melissa Colburn, and Lynn Power, our Executive Director. Before we adjourn our meeting, I would like to extend additional thanks to all the college staff that ensured our meeting was a success, and to all members and public who took the time to look back over the last 12 months with us today. Please take time to fill out the meeting evaluation, which is on our website, As this is only our third virtual meeting, we would appreciate hearing from you. I declare the 67th Annual General Meeting of the College of Registered Nurses of Newfoundland and Labrador adjourned. Thank you.